You're all having a good Monday. Hope everybody had a great weekend. Feels like it's been a while, so bear with me. I've been, doing some golf stuff, obviously, and I jumped in on a couple shows, but we haven't had much baseball other than the weekend. But we're back and we're good to go, and we're going to be fully manned. Sheets will be here for live later tonight. He did update the projections and everything this morning. He'll update them again later. And I'm ready to get into it with you guys. I'm going to go game by game and talk through some of what I like. Reminder, please click the like and subscribe. Also got some great deals out there. Please check out the members page, and I'll post it up here on the bottom of the screen because I think we've got some great stuff going on, and I would like for you guys to be able to check it out. Actually, I don't have that exact one, but it's there anyway on the site. Anyway, all right. Good luck to everybody today. Here's what we're going to go through it game by game starting right now. So we've got Green and Lopez, two of the most popular pitchers tonight in Atlanta. Potentially a little bit of maybe like, I think Roth had it at yellow green. So I think it's probably okay to play. But both these pitchers stand out. The highest K expectancy on the slate is going to be Hunter Green. And I think both these guys are extremely viable. It is a little weird. These are teams we usually like to stack in reasonable hitting conditions. It's 80 degrees in Atlanta, nothing overly special, but solid. So I do think you could get contrarian and play some Atlanta. I think you could maybe make that argument for Cincinnati, although Lopez has been so good, it's hard to go that route. Green is really good, but he'll give up some bombs. So I have both these guys as guys to consider. I don't know where they're going to end up making it for me, but they are, as of right now, two of the top projected, two of the most logical plays. I'm just going to see what else we can do if there's anything I like better later today, but they definitely seem to make a lot of sense. And like I said, I would get to maybe some Braves if I was playing, 150, but I don't think I'm going to get to them as it stands, playing less lineups. I do think that it's an interesting way to get contrarian on a semi-short slate. It's 9 games, but there's still, something you could do. All right, Philadelphia, Minnesota. This is the game with probably the most weather concern, and it's just Roth has it just now as yellow. It does make it a little bit tougher to justify the pitchers for me, but that's fine because I don't really love these pitchers anyway. So probably not going to be getting to a lot from this game myself. SaberSim seems to like a lot better than the Vegas total does. It's more than a run higher. It's a game with an 8 total in Vegas, and I just don't think that it's something that I really all that invested in. I think you could make an argument for the Philly side of it to maybe take a shot, but they're expensive, and it's not like Ober's bad. They haven't really faced him before, so that would be the thing I would do if anything. I just don't think I'm quite getting to Minnesota. But worse plays have been made. So both these teams are probably on the outside looking in for me. But I certainly could understand an argument for a little Minnesota or a little Philadelphia. Just probably not going to be going that way myself, at least not as of now, is not the plan. So we have a pretty insignificant wind day, what seems like, knock on whatever, in Chicago. You got 4 miles an hour wind blowing in. It's not significant enough for me to really weigh it too heavily at 4 miles an hour. If it was up to even 10, I would certainly consider some, potentially maybe using some Tobias Myers. Probably wouldn't get to Assad anyway, but Tobias Myers would be a large field tournament play that I don't hate anyway. The Cubs have struggled, and again, I'm sounding like a broken record. We'll find some stuff that I like a little bit later, but as of right now, I'm sort of seeing this as like I could make an argument for Myers. I can make an argument for the Cubs, but I think the best argument to be made here is probably for the Brewers. I do think Milwaukee is in play here. They've kind of burned me a few times lately, and they're expensive. But I think it's a solid offense. There's some power. They've got depth in it now with Hoskins down at the bottom. So I certainly could understand playing this game at It's one of the few stacks that I'm considering that are maybe a little bit off the board, but I do think Milwaukee is somewhat viable, and I'm certainly not going to fault anybody if they want to play the Cubs either. So I'll mark both of them down for now, but overall, I don't think that it's like a huge over the top priority. I do think Milwaukee is a team that could get it done though today. All right, Chicago in Texas, White Sox. Lorenzen and Fetty, but both these guys by their price, they probably have been a little better than maybe most people realize. You can see though, you're not expecting a whole lot of strikeouts from them, both under 4.5. That's not what you want to have. it feels like a spot where we should stack Texas. And now I know Fetty's been much better this year. I know Fetty's been good. And again, I'm going to argue also that you can make some, 4-4s, some 3-3-2s, some 4-2-1, 4-2-1-1s. We're seeing more and more of the top pros go away from the full game stacking like we had seen for so long. So I'm going to make an argument here that I think that you could certainly do that on this slate. However, I think if you're looking for a full stack, both these teams actually, to me, seem reasonable. Now, less so with the White Sox just because they're so awful, but they are super cheap. Maybe it's a way you could find a way to fit in the higher price bats from Texas. And Texas actually is a little cheaper than we're used to seeing just because they've struggled this year. But I kind of like Texas here. They get to stay home through the All-Star break. They come right out. They get to face Fetty. I'll do a little more research on his history with them. I don't think it's too expansive, but I'm going to take a look at it. I like this Texas team. Of the teams we've talked about so far, they're probably the one I like the most. And look, Fetty's been good all year. It's the only thing that makes it a little bit harder. He's just been very, very solid. But there are lefties here who should be able to give him trouble. It's not like we're getting all the aces today, so we don't have that many offenses to like. And Fetty as an ace is, a lower tier ace, I guess. Should I look back at Lorenzen is the question, from a pitching standpoint. Maybe I could consider this. I'm going to mark Lorenzen down and just as a maybe to be considered later on. I don't love it, but it's just something to do that's a little bit different that makes enough sense to me. But yeah, I can get behind Texas here today. So that's where I'm at right now. Arizona and Kansas City. Just going to check the weather real quick before we go on. It looks like it's 82 degrees, very minimal wind. It's really wild. Like, we've had these crazy wind and heat days for at least the weeks before the All-Star break. And now it's like somebody told the wind just to go away. So it has. Anyway, we've got Diaz for Arizona against Reagans here. And yeah, I'm just going to always be overweight Reagans for the most part, especially when I don't have other pitchers that I love. I don't necessarily love this matchup, but I think that, look, the strikeouts the upside is always there with the strikeouts. He's got one of the best K props on the slate, reasonable price at $9K. I actually have him a little bit ahead of Green and Lopez at the moment, but I certainly think you could make a case for all those guys as being, very, very close together. Anyway, I like Reagans. And I like KC. I thought KC was going to be a little bit more popular today. But I can definitely talk myself into this. This is an offense. This is why we can skip past the early games, because there's some offenses here to like quite a bit as you get later into the slate. So I'm in on KC. And I think that they're definitely one of I have them, probably a little bit ahead of Texas as of right now. I'm still going to have to figure that one out later. The pricing is a little bit harder to get to. It's hard to play with Pasquantino, Perez, and Massey, for example. Adam Frazier, you could see is mega chalk because, 3K leading off. Not even mega chalk, just chalk. Anyway, yeah, KC it is for me. They're right there with Texas as my favorite ones that we've gone over so far. All right. So here's where the ownership's going to go. We've got Houck and Gomber. Now it's interesting because Houck is still, I think, a reasonably good play, and he's going to get some ownership as well at I think I actually like the over on his prop too for strikeout. So Houck belongs in the mix with the others. Now, obviously, you're entering more variance when you play a pitcher in Coors Field against a team with a 4.6 run total. But Houck has been really good. He pitches already in a tough pitcher's park anyway, because you have to face everybody in Boston all the time anyway. And what 20% of your games in New York. So he's used to pitching in tough hitting environments. I don't believe the Rockies have seen him before, which again, I always mention this, but I do think that it's always a little bit of a boost to the pitcher. So I'm okay with the Houck thing. And it's going to be weird to try to figure out how to get off of this. Look, I like Boston. I think I'm just going to say the same thing I always do. Maybe go for a mini stack instead of the full stack. Boston's going first game in Coors. There's a whole thing. Everybody says fade it. I'm okay. I always want to fade the full stacks in Coors anyway, and I don't think you can do it in a way to get off the board enough. So if you were to stack them, and you guys see how many guys have projections because we don't know who started yet. But I am probably going to be on the have less exposure side. if there are some individual guys, it would certainly be Duran and Devers. Duran especially, man, this guy has really, really become awesome. I think it's no surprise to everybody, but he's really, really good. So yeah, maybe a mini stack. Do you want to spend all the way up? Those guys seem a little bit expensive to do that, but they're really pricey, the Red Sox, and it's going to be interesting trying to see how people get to them and where they spend down to make it work. Just to talk about the other side, though, because I did mention Houck. I just always I'm interested in a low-owned Colorado stack. Houck doesn't make you feel great about that because really, like, he's been, outside of like those last two of his last starts before the All-Star break, he's basically been super consistent all year long. He did have a rough go in those two outings against San Diego and New York. I'm okay with taking shots on the Rockies, but it's just Houck is pretty good, and it's not my favorite thing to try to do, but I do think it is a good way to get off the board and get exposure to a 80-degree game in Coors Field when it's clearly the best hitting spot on the slate. So, yeah, can definitely see the three prongs of this one, but I am not going to play any full Boston stacks, and that's just I just don't want to play that much chalk. I think they're going to be like 25% owned by the time it's all said and done as a stack. All right, moving over to the Angels and the Angels and Seattle. Bryce Miller and Tyler Anderson. So I think Seattle's going to get a little love here. And I always said the same things about Tyler Anderson, and he's been more gettable. That even when he doesn't pitch great, like he just doesn't like give up a ton of power historically. This year he's been giving up a lot of power. I think it's okay to play Texas. You've got the cheap bats in there. I should never play Seattle, but it's not my favorite thing to do. I'd say that I have Seattle, like I'll mark it for value specifically, but I'm not like overly excited about it. And in terms of pitching, I think Bryce Miller has to be in the conversation with these other guys. Let's see what he's got the low strikeout, upside, or they've got him at a low strikeout number, but he's really good. He can move through the offense quickly. I think this is a reasonable enough spot to put Miller into a category with Houck just beneath the Reagan's Green Lopez tier for me. But I do think Houck is definitely, that Miller is definitely playable. And I don't think it's the right slate. If Tyler Anderson was like 6,500, I think you could argue for him and argue for Seattle. So yeah, Seattle value and Bryce Miller as my main plays. Not really getting too much else. If you ended up with bats from the Angels, not going to think it's terrible. I just don't think certainly don't want a full stack, but I wouldn't mind like a little mini something. All right, let's take a look. Houston and Oakland. First thing I'm going to do is check on the weather for game time. 76 degrees, so Oakland's going to play a lot better of a hitter's park when it's like this than it has most of the time. So far this season, we've got Hogan Harris, who's, going to pitch a few innings. It's not an ideal situation setup-wise, but you got a reasonably attractive Houston stack that I think definitely belongs in there with the Texas and the Kansas Cities that I was talking about. I definitely am good with getting Harris and then a bad bullpen. It's good enough for me to take a shot, but I have them just a little bit below the Texas KC myself. That's just where I'm at, and I have no issue if anybody has them a little higher. They're also, I think, pretty cheap over on FanDuel. Haven't checked that out fully yet. Still getting my bearings back, guys. But yeah, I think I like Houston here. Again, you're going to have some ownership there, but it's not going to be out of control because that Coors game is going to dictate most of it. And as Sheets always points out, and I always should put it out, but I don't always point it out myself. I do a lot of it. It does give you some options. If you play some stuff in the earlier games, if you have your pitchers in the earlier games, or you've already got, from your side stack, a bunch of runs, maybe you just don't worry about the ownership at all, play Houston. But if you're looking like a long shot, maybe you switch over to the Dodgers or something like that later, depending on how the early part of the slate goes. Yeah, I didn't mention Arrighetti, and I don't know what I want to do with Arrighetti here. I think that we're supposed to play him more than people are going to. So I'll put Arrighetti into just because he's a little cheaper. I do think the strikeout upside is there against Oakland. I think there's definitely downside, and I think if you're not playing Arrighetti, you could definitely talk. I guess this is a three-pronger because I could see myself talking myself into some of the cheap Oakland bets. The problem is we were getting Lawrence Butler at 2K and 2,300 all year. Now he's 35. If we sort it by value, we're going to see some Oakland up here, but it's not like the most exciting. Seth Brown at batting seventh though, like 2,900. So I don't think I'm going to end up, getting to Oakland as a full stack, but I certainly don't mind them as pieces. I have them in the same sort of Seattle category. Oakland for value, but it's not really the same value that it used to be. So yeah, Arrighetti is probably going to be in the top 5 for me pitching wise, just because I like the upside. I also think there's totally downside, so I will hedge it with little pieces from Oakland. Let me just go back to Oakland and say who I like as hitters. We don't know for sure, obviously, who's going to be in yet today, but Seth Brown at 2,900 as power. Lawrence Butler should be leading off 3,500. I love that. Blade, those would be the main guys I would be looking at, and then always Langoliers when you can get to them. All right. Moving into, I think, the most interesting game on the slate, because you can make a lot of cases for a lot of things. Blake Snell has the second highest case expectancy on the slate. He's got a history with the Dodgers. He tends he has huge strikeout upside, and he's also got completely get blown up downside. So it's also 78 degrees. I always say over 70 Dodger Stadium plays well. 8-mile-an-hour winds going out to center sounds good to me. So we gotta decide what we're gonna want to do here. The River Ryan thing is I don't know how many pitches they're gonna let the guy throw. Let's see what they have him for pitches. 72. I don't think you can play him. But I'm interested in the idea of what do we do with San Francisco. So let's look at the hitting for a second. And I'm just going to sort by ownership for, we know Ohtani's going to have ownership all the time. I think the low-owned Dodgers is certainly something that I'm willing to do. And I think that you could argue for the other side of this and say that San Francisco is something we want to do as well. So I know I mentioned a lot of different stacks. I'll sort of, rank them right in a minute. But I think this is like most of the stacks I like are later in the day. And I think getting an off-the-board San Francisco stack in like what I always joke is that their World Series is every series against the Dodgers, especially at Dodger Stadium, it feels like. I think I'm into some San Francisco, and I think I'm into some LA. So to sort of like fine tune everything and bring it all to this, I'll get my core plays, I'll get my early builds and my bets of the day. Although I don't bet as much on baseball as I do on basketball, so I'll get those out later today. But as of right now, I have my favorite pitchers as Reagan's, some version of Lopez, Green, Arrighetti, and then Houck and Miller are the next two that I'm considering. My favorite stacks as of right now, I have Texas and Kansas City as my two favorites. I think Houston would be next, and then would be the Dodgers, then San Francisco. I'm also still intrigued by the Milwaukee side of things, and then you have the Seattle value, Oakland value, and then obviously the Boston for the mini stacks, I think is the way to go. So, that's a lot of the first look podcast, but I'll get a better feel for it when I start hand building and I start running some sims and things like that. We appreciate you guys. It's good to be back. Really, really good to have everyone. We'll be in Discord if you need anything. And Sheets will be back, as I mentioned, later today. And good luck to everybody. I'm looking forward to this. Starting off the second half of the season. Let's get it started on the right foot. Want to see some screenshots from people. Want to see some victories. And ready for the TrueDFS domination second half of the year.